Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone and Happy New Year. Just quickly about myself, I am a Program Officer with the Secretariat, and one of my responsibilities is to look after the work on the Indonesian-Swiss country-led initiative. One of the work streams is developing guidelines for ESM, which is the work of the expert working group, which we will be discussing today. So, to have a quick look at our agenda, I thought it would be quite helpful to touch on the mandate of the expert working group, as was given by the 11th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, the meeting which was held in April and May of last year in 2013. I'll then give a quick recap on what the framework for environmentally sound management is. Next, we'll look at what happened at the first meeting of the expert working group, which just took place last month. Take a close look at the outcomes. There were many. Then look forward to when the next meeting of the group will be, and lastly, there'll be time for questions and answers. So just before I start, this is quite a detailed presentation, and I've done it this way so that participants can download the presentation at the end of the session, and it will be very useful, I'm sure, to have all of this information. But I won't necessarily go into every item on each slide. Now, looking at the mandate of the expert working group on ESM, well, the Indonesian-Swiss country-led initiative was commenced in in earnest at COP10 in 2010. Now, was it 2010? No, it was 2011. I'm sorry. And work was undertaken between COP10 and COP11, which culminated in a decision BC 11.1 on the follow-up to this Indonesian-Swiss country-led initiative. Now, the main objective is, as the slide says, to improve effectiveness of the Basel Convention, and specifically to look at further elaborating on the principle of environmentally sound management, which, as we know, is one of the core pillars of the Convention. Now, from decision BC 11.1 from COP11, the expert group was mandated to look into short-term actions that might be implemented, essentially to implement ESM and the ESM framework, which I'll touch upon shortly. Also to develop a longer-term work program for additional priorities and key work items. Now, this work program would really commence after COP12, which is in May 2015. It basically needs to be endorsed by COP12, so this is definitely a longer-term program. And there would be reports, as I've just mentioned, to both EWG 9 and COP12. Following COP11, a group of 25 experts were nominated, 5 experts from each region. If funding were to be available, then the group would hold physical meetings. Touching on the ESM framework, well, I'd mentioned that the CLI initiative really comes from the adoption of an omnibus decision at COP10. From this decision, a group was mandated to develop a framework on environmentally sound management, noting that really ESM is a core principle of the Convention, but that stakeholders really needed more information as to what constitutes environmentally sound management and how it should be implemented. So between COP10 and COP11, a small group, a technical expert group, developed this ESM framework. This was adopted by COP11, and it identifies what can be done by key stakeholder groups. The elements of ESM. Secondly, what tools can support the implementation of ESM? And lastly, how governments can develop strategies to implement ESM. So this was a first step to really elaborate more on the principle of ESM, but it was noted at the time that really further work would need to be done to implement both the framework and ESM in general. So this brings us to the expert working group. I've already gone through the mandate. Just a quick recap, it was to develop these short-term actions, so immediately following COP11 to implement ESM and the framework, and then also to look at a longer-term work program to implement ESM. Well, the first meeting of the group, I should say there was actually a meeting prior to the physical meeting that is on this slide here. The group first met at the end of September, but this was electronically. And what they did was decide on some pre-work to do before the first meeting. But I'll elaborate on that more in a moment. But the first physical meeting was in December in Argentina. 18 of the 25 experts were able to be present, and we were joined by 9 observers. So as mentioned, the group looked at the work that was done in the lead up to the meeting, has already decided on what short-term work items to proceed with implementation for, and also discussed this idea of a longer-term work program. Now, there are quite a few outcomes of the expert working group meeting. The group was very, very motivated and very productive during their 3-day meeting. When introducing each of the outcomes, I thought it might be clearer to give an idea of where the mandate came from for each of the different outcomes, because essentially all of the actions coming out of this meeting have the mandate can be found in this decision BC 11/1. So the first, really the general mandate for the expert working group is to implement ESM. And it's very clearly stated that this mandate is very clearly stated in the general text of decision BC 11/1. Now, in response to this general mandate, the group has agreed to develop pilot projects to implement and demonstrate ESM. Now, we're very fortunate that the government of Switzerland put forth money or funding prior to the group so that several pilot projects can be implemented, basically starting the beginning of this year. Now, the group invited proposals from all of the members for these pilot projects, 8 of which were received. And it was very positive in that the group managed to merge different pilot project proposals so that all of the proposals will be taken forward in some way. But the 3 on the table in this sort of intersessional period leading up to the second meeting, firstly, a pilot project to assess if notifications, consents, inspections, and enforcement of TBM of waste represent ESM, and this will also look into the illegal traffic and take-back element as well. There will be 3 pilot countries, Tanzania, Egypt, and Madagascar, and the Secretariat has already started drafting the terms of reference for consultants who will undertake that project. The next 2 projects focus on e-waste. The second project is to be led by BCRC China, looking at essentially an assessment of the ESM of e-waste in the region. The expert working group did identify potential countries to be included, but it will be the BCRC who will contact these countries and secure their involvement. The next project is the e-waste project in Central America, and this will be led by BCRC, the BCRC for Central America and Mexico. And funding is already secured for this from a separate source. So, but these are the 3 main projects that will go on. Oh, okay. I understand there were some technical problems, but I think I'm back now. At the second meeting of the group and further meetings, there will, of course, be opportunities to look at further pilot projects, which will be implemented subject to funding. I should mention that there will be a steering committee to oversee the implementation of these pilot projects. And of course, the Secretariat will provide support in terms of hiring consultants, contracts, and the like as required. The next outcome relates very specifically to the Annex of Decision BC 11/1. Now, this is really where the main mandate of the group comes from. It's the terms of reference for the expert working group. Now, what the group did was look at this terms of reference and just make doubly sure that all of the actions that they decided upon had a direct mandate to the terms of reference as listed here. So the first two items from this annex are firstly to, well, on the basis of short-term actions, to collect available information on national and other ESM standards and practices, and secondly, to develop generic guidance on how to establish ESM. So these are items that the COP has requested the group to look at. The outcome here is that certainly the group recognized that the ESM framework that I've already referred to was a very positive start to further elaborating ESM, but that more work was needed in specific areas. So to look really at developing some more practical guidance, looking into things such as terminology, model legislation, licensing and permitting, and those sorts of things. These were the areas that the group decided we really need more information. So what will happen is there are 6 different groups that were established by the expert working group of experts who will look at developing these practical manuals before the second meeting of the expert working group. And then these manuals will be reviewed at EWG2, but of course any outputs developed by the group will ultimately be reviewed by the open-ended working group and the Conference of the Parties. Next, in Annex 2, the group has been requested to identify ESM elements and develop practical guidance. Very similar to the last slide, but it should be noted that this is on certain waste streams. So this second work on guidance will focus on priority waste streams which the group identified to be e-waste, used lead-acid batteries, mercury-containing waste, medical, used oils, and household wastes. Now, the group decided that it would be most appropriate for a consultant to be hired to develop these fact sheets on each of the different waste streams. Of course, the consultant will be guided by the expert working group in terms of its terms of reference, and also a draft fact sheet guideline will be provided to the consultant. This will be reviewed again at the next meeting of the expert working group. Next, the COP has requested the group to assess existing useful training and information material on policies, legislation, and best practices on the ESM. Now, this is really an information gathering exercise in the first instance. So the group requested the Secretariat to retain a consultant to essentially gather this information, and then it will be considered by the group at its second meeting. Next, a very important area for the group's work is the private sector and how to incentivize investment in ESM and implementation of ESM. Now, the observers to the group, many of whom are from the private sector, have volunteered to take forward this work, which really it's the most appropriate group to do so. All right. We're having a few technical hiccups here, but I'll just repeat what I was saying, that the next area of work is to look at incentives to encourage the private sector to invest in ESM and to implement ESM. Now, the private sector, the observers, there were several observers at the first meeting, and they have volunteered to compile information on these incentives, and then the group will consider this compilation at the next meeting and decide on an appropriate way forward. Right. So those are really, that covers the short-term initial actions that the group has decided on. Next is this longer-term work program. As I mentioned, it's something that will be developed over the next year in the lead up to COP12, but really it will focus on actions to be taken after COP12, because these actions are going to require COP endorsement. COP11 very helpfully highlighted some key areas to focus on, which are listed on the slide, looking at interpretation of ESM and so forth. And the group has already started to build its draft work program. And actually the report of the group will be available within the next few weeks. And this draft work program will be appended to the report for those who are interested. So just a quick recap of what's going to happen over the next few months. So we've got these work streams going on. Firstly on the pilot projects, next on the guidance, both general guidance and waste stream specific guidance. We're going to have the consultant gathering this training and information material, a group from the private sector working on the incentives document, and again the group will be looking at its work program. So it's going to be a very busy time. Now it's the second meeting will most likely be at the end of May or in early June. It's going to be decided this month, and then information will be put on the Basel website to that effect. The main work on the table at the second meeting will be, well, to consider all of the intersessional work that's been done, and of course to plan for further work. And very importantly, the group will need to prepare its report for the 9th meeting of the open-ended working group, which will take place in September. So that is really all I wanted to touch upon in this presentation, but of course I'm more than happy to answer any questions